Picture this. You're taking a nice walk through a sweeping, beautiful grassland, and you spot a familiar, delicious-looking blackberry. Naturally, you might think it's just a sweet little treat from Mother Nature. But what happens when that tasty berry is actually an aggressive invader, literally choking out the native ecosystem? Well, welcome to a totally fascinating ecological mystery. Today, we're diving into a massive, multidisciplinary investigation into the invasive American bramble in South Africa and figuring out exactly how scientists are planning to stop it in its tracks.
To fight back against this invasion, researchers are zeroing in on a very specific tool, and that is biological control. Basically, this means controlling a pest by introducing one of its natural enemies or predators. So instead of dousing the landscape in harsh chemicals or attempting totally impossible manual labor, the goal is to find a highly specialized insect or pathogen from the weed's native home. We want something that will eat this specific plant, and only this plant, to bring the whole ecosystem back into balance.
Welcome to this explainer. You know, I absolutely love breaking down these complex environmental puzzles, and today we're unpacking a really groundbreaking study that's paving the way for American Bramble Biocontrol down in South Africa. The researchers on this project knew right away that to solve this problem, they couldn't just stare at the plants. They had to integrate genetics, ecology, and even human socio-economics to build a completely airtight case for action. So, here's the docket for today's investigation. We're going to cover the alien bramble invasion itself, unmask the specific invaders, search for some natural enemies, weigh the costs and benefits, and finally, look at paving the way forward. Let's just jump right in. Section 1. The alien bramble invasion. The crime scene. Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp the solution, we first need to understand the sheer scale of our crime scene in South Africa, because the stakes here are incredibly high. The American bramble is this highly adaptable, super fast-growing weed that forms massive, aggressive thickets. It completely outcompetes the native vegetation, which, as you can imagine, alters the entire ecosystem. It actually grows so unbelievably dense that it stops wildlife from moving through and completely blocks human access. And this isn't just a nature problem either. It threatens commercial forestry and agricultural industries by taking over grazing lands. And crucially, it is primarily wreaking absolute havoc in South Africa's grassland biome. Moving on to Section 2, Unmasking the Invaders, Genetics and Morphology. For a really long time, scientists thought they were just dealing with a single enemy. But by analyzing the morphology, the physical traits of these plants, researchers realized they actually had two completely distinct groups of invaders from North America on their hands. On one hand, we have Rubus section Arguti. These guys are the giants. They average about 185 centimeters tall with distinctly curved stems, and you'll mostly find them absolutely dominating the roadsides. On the other hand, we have Rubus section Cuneifolii. These are significantly shorter, averaging about 109 centimeters, with erect, upright stems, and these are the ones aggressively invading the open grasslands. Now, what's really wild about this genetic fingerprinting is the clear picture it paints of the invasion. The researchers went out and collected DNA from these plants across 5 different provinces. Astonishingly, the genetic testing revealed complete genotypic uniformity for Cuneifolii across its entire surveyed range. Basically, it's one massive, identical clone army spreading across the grasslands. Meanwhile, the Arguti plants showed 5 totally distinct genotypes with distinct geographic clustering. This kind of genetic clarity is absolutely vital. Why? Because if you're going to introduce a biological control agent, you absolutely need to know exactly which genetic variation of the plant you're trying to take down.
Section 3. Searching for natural enemies. Ecology.
With our suspects perfectly profiled, researchers looked to see if any local South African bugs were maybe already fighting the good fight against these invaders. What they found brilliantly illustrates this concept called the enemy release hypothesis. The native South African brambles are absolutely loaded with local bugs. We're talking up to 14 different herbivore species hanging out on just one plant type. But the alien invaders, they have significantly fewer herbivores. The reason is pretty simple. When these plants were introduced to South Africa, they left all their natural predators back in North America. The local native bugs just look at these alien plants and don't even recognize them as a food source.
So here is the really crucial, kind of terrifying point. The researchers found absolutely 0 viable native biological control agents to combat the alien brambles. In fact, despite having a massive sample size, they didn't find a single insect on the Cuneifolii plants. Not one. The local ecosystem is completely defenseless, and the native bugs are just not going to stop this invasion.
Which brings us to Section 4, Weighing Costs and Benefits. Economics. Now we hit a very human complication. People actually really like this weed.
we've got a classic conflict of interest here. On the positive side of our ledger, the benefits. People love to forage these berries for personal consumption. Some folks sell them commercially, and they're even used in alcohol brewing. But then you have to look at the costs. These massive, dense thickets harbor vermin, they block livestock, they severely reduce agricultural crop yields, and they create really intense fire hazards. The researchers realized that the economic damage caused by the invasive bramble is what economists call an externality. This basically means the benefits are highly privatized for just a few individuals, but the massive costs of managing the weed and dealing with lost agricultural productivity, all of that is passed right on to the general public.
When the researchers actually ran the economic stakeholder data, they found a frankly staggering ratio, 13.5 to 1. For every single unit of private economic benefit gained from picking or selling these berries, there are 13.5 units of public cost incurred from the damages and management. To put it simply, the environmental and agricultural devastation overwhelmingly eclipses the value of a few tasty blackberries.
Finally, Section 5, Paving the Way Forward, the verdict.
So, all the evidence has been gathered. The genetic profiles are in, the ecological surveys are complete, and the economic ledgers are finally balanced. This multidisciplinary data points to one very clear conclusion: that overwhelming 13.5 to 1 economic cost absolutely justifies definitive action. We just can't leave it alone. The ecology proves that alien brambles lack effective native predators, meaning nature isn't going to fix this on its own in South Africa. But because we now have the precise genetic profiling of both the Arguti and Cuneifolii invaders, scientists know exactly what they're targeting. Therefore, importing highly specialized biological control agents from North America isn't just feasible, it's practically the only logical path forward.
By fully understanding the genetics, the ecology, and the human impact, science has perfectly paved the way to strike back. The groundwork is laid, the target is locked, and the solution is quite literally waiting across the ocean. The only question left is, are we ready to unleash nature's own weed killers to reclaim the South African landscape? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helped you see the incredible, fascinating structure behind ecological problem solving. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.